Good evening. I am Sylvester Arnab, and I'm a professor of game science at Coventry University in the UK. Welcome to the panel session on frugal education, where we will be exploring playful learning within the context of resilience development, as well as 21st century learning. And we will explore this topic from the perspective of the ACES project, a project that is investigating playful and frugal approaches for developing social resilience. And you can visit the project's website at aces.gchanges.org, and our Twitter handle is at GCRF_ACES. So with me today, there are from 3 countries, from Malaysia, from Indonesia, and the UK, who are active practitioners and researchers at the core of the ACES project. So, panel members, would you like to introduce yourselves? And perhaps you can talk about your interests and your affiliation. And yeah, so the floor is yours. So perhaps we can start with Aazani. I think you're on mute. Yeah.
Sorry. Hi. Are we in alphabetical order?
I suppose so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the welcome, Sylvester. Hi, I'm Dr. Aazani. I'm a senior lecturer at University Malaysia Sarawak in Malaysia, Borneo. I'm actually a marine scientist, but I'm into cross-cutting research now with ACES. And with me is Dr. Fitri.
Hi everyone, I'm Fitri. I'm teaching at University Malaysia Sarawak, just as Aazani is. I teach literally education courses here. So my interest lies in the use of technology in teaching, particularly to understand how teachers conceive what they know and how they disseminate knowledge based on what they know. So, yep, over to you, Alex.
Fantastic. Yeah. Alex, yeah.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Alex Masters, and I'm a designer, developer, practice-based researcher, and technologist at Coventry University. I work alongside Sylvester and Dom. I'm part of the Game Changers team and also part of the ACES team. So I'll be giving you a bit of a background into frugal education as a starter shortly. But my interests I'll kind of discuss in the middle of that, because I'll just be giving you too much of a preview now.
Thank you. Deka?
Hello, good evening. My name is Deka. I'm from Malang State University in Indonesia. My expertise in instructional technology, and now I'm working for ACES Indonesia as a designer in learning media and curriculum.
Fantastic. Dom?
Hi, I'm Dom. I'm at Coventry University with Sylvester and Alex, where I'm a research fellow. My research interests are in education and skills development, capabilities development, resilience development, basically how education can impact on human development, I suppose, in the broadest way. Putting that, I've got over 20 years of teaching under my belt and a bit less of that with regard to academic research, but I'm working on it. And part of the ACES program. I'm very happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. So as an agenda or structure for today's discussions, Alex, as he has mentioned previously, that he will set the scene and context on frugal education, and the panel discussions will be around the 3 principles of frugal education, where we will unpick our perspectives on playful learning, resilience, and 21st century learning. So we are happy to have the panel members today from different backgrounds as well as different expertise and interests, and it will be interesting to see their thoughts and their perspectives on this. So Alex, the floor is yours to set the context on what do we mean by frugal education. Alex, I think you are mute.
Thanks, Sylvester. You can hear me okay? And you see my slides, yes. Is that right?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Right. Okay, so as the first slide shows, we're talking here about creative, practical, and sustainable education. That really is the essence of frugal education, or at least the way I perceive it to be. Before I start, there's a URL at the bottom that if anyone who's watching can follow on and sort of get a bit more of a deep dive into some of the things I'm going to talk about here. So really, these slides are just a short overview of some of the concepts within it, and you can have a good read and watch some interesting videos and see some different projects on that website. So to give you a bit of a background as to what frugal education is, in a nutshell, it's about harnessing the power of design thinking, leveraging available resources, and embracing sustainability to really develop creative, practical, and sustainable education. The concept takes its inspiration from the practices of frugal innovation, which, for those who haven't heard of this before, is the art of reducing complexity and cost of production and services to meet the needs of developing countries, conscious consumerism and sustainability. So it's really about using what you have in creative ways to develop new ideas. Innovation from a frugal standpoint. So building on this foundation, frugal education takes the concepts such as design thinking, systems thinking, the circular economy, donut economics, and sustainable development, and applies these within an educational context. There's a lot to unpack there, but that's what I say. If you go, you can check on the website, and each of these different themes is broken down to give you a bit of an idea of what they cover. So a bit of background on myself. I'm a designer by trade, I guess you could say. I started in education around 6 years ago, and I joined the Disruptive Media Learning Lab in Coventry. And my background from education was in design, multimedia design, but I've had a very varied career working in journalism, web development, carpentry, photography, social media and brand protection, and a host of other areas. So when I came into education, I had a different way of thinking than a lot of people that were already there, because I didn't come from an educational background apart from my degree. So this you see on the screen here, these are some pictures from in our Disruptive Media Learning Lab. So this is an innovation space that we use to design new projects. So in my time in the lab, I've used some of the varied background of things that I've done and applied that in this setting. And that's kind of where a lot of the ideas around frugal education were born, really, from my experiences and working with the likes of Sylvester and our other colleagues to design projects and how best to do that with the resources we have available. So as I said before, these are like the main categories that I would say inspire frugal education and inform the way it's designed. So this is a shed. Now, when I grew up in the UK, the granddad shed was a big influence on me. So I think it's a good metaphor for frugal education, in that it's one of those spaces where it had none of the things you needed, but it had everything you needed to make the thing that you wanted. So this is a really good example of like looking at what you have at your disposal and applying those materials and resources to build what you need. So that's just kind of like an introduction. The problem really here is that when you think of, a lot of people think of frugal, they think of cheap, they think of like a basic. Well, it's not really the point here. Yes, this idea of using what you have at your disposal could be very basic things, but it could also be very advanced things. For example, Arvind Gupta is a brilliant frugal innovator. He uses everyday objects to create science materials and different inventions. So, for example, here we have a jet car, which is built from plastic bottles and buttons and balloons and waste materials. He has a whole host of gadgets and gizmos that he's created to help teach science and maths to students. So he's a great example on one end of the spectrum where you're using very basic materials to achieve your goal, doing more with less, which is the essence of frugal innovation. But this spectrum goes all the way to the far reaches of high engineering techniques. So rocket ships and Formula One cars, for example. People are surprised when I use F1 as an example of frugal innovation. But if you look at an F1 car, the entire design of this machine is to use the smallest number of parts, to do it as cheaply as possible, have each of those parts perform multiple functions at the same time, and only to last a very short period of time. So it's really about getting the most out of what you have, making each part work for you. So it's a really interesting way of looking at it. Both Arvind Gupta's Toys from Trash and Formula One cars share the same philosophy, to make the most of what you've got and be innovative and creative about how you solve problems. So this is a picture from our Coventry campus. As you can see, it's quite a sophisticated building you see here. This is our engineering building. And even though we're in a time where in the UK, for example, in Western universities, we tend to have a lot of capital available, our budgets are large, and yet with the global pandemic, it's been a great leveler, and in that there's a lot of problems that we might see in developing countries that we're facing in the UK as well, in that we have a smaller number of students coming in, we have a large budget, which means our operating costs are very high, but the student numbers are dwindling and the available funds are not there, and we've now had to move online. So we're having to look at problems we wouldn't have had before. We maybe didn't necessarily think of our budgets and look at things in a frugal way, because we might have so much available materials and money. But that's changing very much. We have to do more with less. We're on a different scale, but it's still the same principle. We have a huge amount of students to support. We have a much smaller budget, and now we're having to look at ways to reuse spaces, reuse materials in creative ways. So this is something that we do a lot in Creative Culture Project, in the Creative Culture team, and in the ACES team. We're looking at this from how do we design new teaching practices using the materials and the funds and the resources that we have in a smart way to deliver a more equitable educational practice, to democratize education and make it available for all. Because now, especially with this more connected teaching future that we're finding ourselves moving into, a great deal of what we do, we need to be able to share with others so we can all learn from it. Here's a really interesting, fun sort of example that one of the first things that got me into this idea of frugal education. I found this picture, and I think it's an amazing example of frugal education. This is just a simple GIF. It's tiny. Anyone could send this to anyone in the world. It's incredibly small, and it's animated all the different potential exercise routines you might do in a gym. So with just this one picture, you could get fit and you could teach others how to exercise and look after themselves. And it's just simply one tiny picture. So it conveys a huge amount of information, and it's fun and engaging, and it's very basic, and it's a clever way of using what we already have. I mean, GIF is is almost in the internet world is an ancient technology. So it's a very clever way to use it to teach. So what I've created here is a set of guiding principles for frugal education, which we're going to discuss now. There's three main principles: design with an open mind, leveraging available resources, and building at the speed of need. So these cover various aspects of frugal education, which I'll now break down one, and we can discuss that further and how that applies to playful learning and the projects that we're doing in ACES. Before I move into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the circular pedagogy model. This is something we're working on, where in much the same way as we talk about designing new ideas, we need a system where the circular economy is a great example of how we use our resources and build a more sustainable development of teaching and product design in the world in general, because we have an issue with sustainability that we need to address as a world, really, as an entire planet. So this is a basic cycle here. We have design, resourcing, building, and delivering. So what we need to add to this is the idea of recycling. So as we build and deliver our teaching and learning practice, we should be recycling this back into our next ideas. So we have a cyclical iterative process here. So whatever we recycle, we then redesign based on what we're learning, and we use those as resources for the next idea. Around this, we have research, prototyping, evaluation, and open sourcing. So as we design and resource projects, we're researching what we need to deliver that. And as we move into the building stage, we prototype our ideas. We design and iterate in a cyclical process, learning from what we're doing. As we then deliver that, we evaluate what we've done. And then from that evaluation, we open source those designs that we've now delivered. They become part of the community of education practice, and that informs the research. So we go round in a cyclical process. So this is really kind of like the essence of frugal education here, to build upon this sharing community and this cyclical approach to design, but do this in a sustainable manner. So I'll move now on to the first principle here. We have design with an open mind. So really the idea behind designing with an open mind is to get creative, to collaborate with those you're designing for, taking the time to view the learning designs from their perspective, from the student perspective. The more accessible your designs, the more engaging it's going to be for students, and the more useful it's going to be for other educators. So the first aspect of this is creativity. So look to seek inspiration from disparate sources when creating or expanding on your designs. Combine ideas and techniques and concepts from different disciplines and use those in innovative ways. So we want to really foster experimentation here, creative thinking and problem solving within your participants, really, and to incorporate their designs and insights into future iterations of your design. Second aspect here is collaboration. Great learning design is achieved through collaboration. That's been proven time and time again. So include your audience in the design process. So this is your student. Include the student in the design process. The earlier you do this, the better, really. So listen to your audience, encourage participation, and be empathetic to their needs, concerns, and suggestions for improvement. Use what you learn to co-create the learning design for those you're designing it to serve. And thirdly here, the aspect of openness. Share your designs and make them freely available within the public domain. This is to benefit all educators around the world. Allow others to apply and adapt and build on your designs through detailed guidance that you can provide so others can use it. Making your designs easily discoverable, accessible, and open license. So we recommend using Creative Commons, for example, to openly license your design ideas for others to use and integrate into their teaching practice. So hopefully we can open the floor up now to discuss these three aspects and this principle and how that applies to the projects that are being developed in the ACES project.
That's great. Thanks, Alex, for a good background on what do we mean by frugal education and the different types of inspirations that have informed the development of this particular approach. And yeah, so I would like to open the discussions. This is the first aspect out of the three. So anyone has got anything to share in terms of how is this practice in your activities with your institution, communities, and so forth, and what are the approaches that you have used in your community? So perhaps you can start with Aazani and Fitri, maybe.
Trying to go first?
You want to start? Okay. Yeah. Thanks very much, Alex, for the sharing. Definitely a lot of the keywords that you mentioned for creativity and collaboration and openness in not just the space, but as well as the sharing of materials with the teaching pool afterwards as well. I think one of the strengths of ACES in Malaysia is that we do have a cooperative teaching and learning team, which come from engineering background and marine science background, and definitely even for simple things like the use of terms and definitions would be very different across different disciplines, and just helping our team, the teaching team, to break down understanding of definitions is the way forward even. So it's not only about, like you mentioned, the open spaces as in the environment that we provide the student, but even the kind of leadership in the way the learning is done as well. So all of us are learning from each other in the team, and I think that's really important when we are talking about building educators who are more highly empathetic. Sorry,
Yeah.
empathetic.
I struggled with it too.
That and in the way that you have reacted as well. For me, trying to pronounce a word that I find a struggle with, I think exactly the same way we mirror to our students. When our students have communication issues, we also make it a little fun, and everyone has laugh together, not at the expense of the person, but as part of the learning process, providing them this safe environment where they can learn. So I think the open spaces and, like you mentioned, the open minds, that's really an important step. And having a team that's diverse, a team teaching in a way that is everyone is open, is quite an important part. So I could talk for a few days about that, but maybe I'll let someone else explore another insight for what's been shared by Alex earlier. Thanks.
Fantastic. Fitri, would you like to add something, or?
Yeah, picking up on what Alex was saying about being open to being creative. Yeah, how do you spark that? How do you get people to be creative? How do you get people to create? In the first place. I find that to be a struggle with a lot of adults, particularly when they've already been working for a long time, because I think work habits, tend to form, and sometimes because you're comfortable with the way that you do things, you don't want to go outside of your comfort zone. So when we approach people, when we approach teachers to come and learn about how to gamify their lessons, this is actually one of the biggest struggles that we face, because that creativity can be quite a challenge, because people don't know where to start. People don't know where to, and this habit, I think, of wanting to get everything correct all the time, So that becomes, in a way, a wall. Instead of going forward to explore, you tend to think like, is my step correct, or is my step wrong? Am I doing this right? So that's why I think creativity is a huge word on its own. And when you see it in action, the interpretations, I think, we have to be a little bit careful about how people actually take it in, how people respond to it, how people react to it, and go on to construct things.
That is very true, because when we think about the project that we are working on, especially in ACES, we are looking at playful aspects. So playful aspects is to encourage people to develop the sense of ownership, sense of autonomy, and sense of agency. So it is important to onboard those who are not familiar with different ways for redesigning or reimagining their learning. So it's quite interesting that, perhaps one of the things that we can actually do is to encourage teachers to explore more, take risk, and not worrying about whether they are doing it right the first time. Because when we are playing, right, it is an iterative process. So we are learning through the playing, and then we are improving the skills, competencies, or whatever rules that we need to actually follow in that particular game. For instance, so we want to practice it as well in terms of designing with an open mind. So we are playing with an open mind. So perhaps this is something that Deka could add, perhaps in terms of what you guys are doing in Indonesia.
Okay, thank you, Sai. Actually, these three focuses we have applied in ASIS Indonesia. For example, in creative, we are create something new. For example, we have playful and frugal curriculum, namely STEM bucket, and we choose what is stable for our children in Indonesia. And about collaborative, actually our work is voluntary basis, so we have a volunteer, namely Solo Mengajar, and we did some need analysis. So they reported to us what they need in the field or in the site, and we provided. And talking about the open, we have published our ideas in our YouTube channel, TikTok channel, and also in Instagram. Actually, we are in Indonesia have implemented, and we learn more about you. And Fitri's idea is good. I think we can make some improvisation. Thank you.
That's
I love
great.
your TikToks. We've seen them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's great that because using existing platforms that is empathic to the stakeholders, trying to do the outreach. I think it is important for us to try and see what are they engaging with in order for us to really onboard them into the idea. So yeah, so I like the idea of using Instagram and using TikTok, and perhaps Deka, you can be one of the influencers. So that yeah. So Dom, in terms of looking at this from the perspectives of capabilities, from the educator point of view as well as from the learner point of view, what are your thoughts?
I'm muting. Yeah, I think it's very positive, really. You've touched on a number of things there with regard to motivation, the idea that we tend to be more inclined to do things that we feel good at. So, the thing about a playful approach is that it allows us to practice, as you've said, in a sort of low stakes environment. I think the other thing, looking at these three areas, is this idea of collaboration. Education, in my opinion, up until quite recently, really has been all about telling people what to learn, whereas the idea of involving the learner and getting them on board, negotiation of learning, talking about what is meaningful to them, means that they're much more likely to be invested in it. And then with a playful approach, they're much more likely to succeed because they have multiple iterations to practice that thing with a lower stakes environment. So those two things coming together, I think, are very important. And where it links into capability is the idea that education enhances people's ability to do things in the world. I mean, the more that you know, the more you can do. Yeah, and the thing about capability as well is you don't actually have to do it. It's this idea of you have the potential to do it. So when we are negotiating learning, when we're collaborating on that, we're talking about, what do you want to be achieving in your life? What do you want to do? And so in that sense, education really can be empowering, and collaboration and having an approach which actually fosters learning and learners' interest and motivation to learn is all part of what I would imagine is a successful recipe.
Yeah, I think that is definitely valid in terms of encouraging us to really work with the stakeholders who are the learners themselves, and educators being at the forefront or the front line of education. We need to ensure that they are given the opportunity to really express themselves as well in terms of how they can push the boundary of their creativity in terms of the co-creation of different types of learning resources, and I think we need to give them credit for being able to maintain their teaching practices for so many years and how they are able to really incrementally develop the content that they use and they deliver in the classroom. So perhaps we need to, I think institutions should give them more space to explore different ideas and given them the incentives perhaps that will encourage them to really explore and collaborate with teachers from other schools. Yeah. So are there yeah.
So I was just going to say, I mean, if you look at the agendas that governments have, which is skills development, this is very much linked to capabilities. If we talk about the old approaches to education, which are about retention and reproduction, those aren't really useful skills. They aren't the sorts of things that governments want. What they want are open-minded, critical thinking people. And these are the sorts of things that we're developing through a playful approach.
Yeah. So I think this sort of link with the second principle of Frugal in terms of how can this be practical in the real sense? How do we leverage available resources? And Alex, perhaps you can set the scene for this principle and then see what we can discuss.
Absolutely, yes. Great points for everyone involved there. I think creativity, it does breed resilience, and it is a really important part of this process. And to bring the students and the teachers together really helps, as you were saying, Sylvester and Fitri, about how do you kind of inspire the teachers to be creative or understand how to do that and really not be afraid of it. And I think by understanding what the student is going through, and the student also understanding what the educator is going through, when everyone's on the same page talking together, you can really start to build things, and the students will give you that space to explore and make mistakes and to build on that, because they're part of the journey, rather than you just going to the classroom and saying this is how it is, and you do the thing that works every time because that's safe. But safe is not necessarily the best course of action when you're trying to build creative problem solving within an educational context, I think. So anyway, moving on, as Sylvester said, I just wanted to add that in there a little bit before I forget what I was going to say. But second principle here is about leveraging available resources. So this really is about, it's more the frugal part of this, in that we don't just want you to think outside the box. This is a bit cheesy, but we want you to use the box. Okay, so seek out available materials, repurpose what I tend to refer to as trailing edge technologies, which is a term I've from Jim Groom and John Udell, who have used this term before. So the idea of cutting edge technologies, we've seen, AR and VR and everything else under the sun that's always kind of peddled as the next great thing. But we have all these trailing edge technologies, things we've had for many, many years that sit there in classrooms and in communities that maybe could be leveraged to be used to engage in an educational setting. And people tend to forget about them, tend to think that they're old hat and they're not important, but actually they can bring the most engagement from your students. So using these existing resources in new and novel ways, really, and leveraging what you have at your disposal to often improve your designs. So we're really considering cost of delivery, ease of access, and practicality. So the first one here as an aspect of this is resourcefulness. So leveraging those available resources by recycling, upcycling, and combining materials in new and inventive ways. So you can extract that untapped value. Inspire your students by promoting a culture of resourcefulness, which really breeds that sustainability within an educational setting. Secondly, be practical. So the latest gadgets and educational fads are great and everything, but are they the best tools for the job? So consider the practicality of your design, the technologies and the materials required, the physical and the virtual spaces you'll need to deliver this, and the intellectual and physical accessibility of what you're doing. You might be using the latest, greatest stuff, but it might not necessarily be what you need, and it might not be accessible for all that are using it. So the financial and human resource cost of delivery is very important in this. We're talking about what can we afford? What do we have at our disposal? And that is not just about money and materials, but about people. How can we better use the resources that we have available, the people that we have within our educational institutions and communities that can help deliver this? And thirdly, about resilience. Sometimes technologies fail, spaces are unavailable, global pandemics come along and grind life to a halt. So equip your designs with the flexibility to adapt gracefully in unforeseen circumstances. That's really what this part of this principle is all about. Think about the designs you're creating and how you might change them and how they might be flexible in a scenarios that you can't control. So you could be in an area where it's prone to flooding. So the school is now unavailable. So how do you take what you would do in the classroom and move that somewhere else, for example? Perhaps you don't have an educational space that you can leverage. So how might you use the community spaces to deliver educational practice? We tend to hear a lot from academics, I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have the space. That's great, but we can't always rely on others to fix the problem. We need to lead by example. So think about how do we use time, money and space in creative ways to solve the problem and to show others different ways that we can achieve it, really. So that really is the essence of leveraging available resources as a principle. So I'd love to hear how you guys are doing this in your various projects and how ACES is developing this principle.
Thanks, Alex. Deka, perhaps you would like to talk about some of the stuff that you guys are doing in Indonesia and how is this principle being applied in the stuff that you're doing?
Okay, actually, I agree with Alex's explanation. This is really important to leverage available resource because it has time to streamline the learning process. It can make the learning process be more effective and efficient. In Indonesia, about resourcefulness, we use leaves, tin can, billboard, and the other used material to create something playful and frugal learning. And about practicality, we create the ideas to create STEM bucket or traditional game that we choose is actually to provide a student, even in remote area and urban area, can play it. So I think even in urban and remote area, they can find easy materials around us. And talking about the resilience, since pandemic hit Indonesia in last year, actually majority of students in Indonesia got Zoom fatigue. They are bored with the online learning methods. So this idea of STEM bucket and traditional games really helpful. And actually, the traditional game in Indonesia not much different from Malaysia. We have a lompat karet, bola bekel, dakon, selodoran, and the other. And that's our ideas to leverage our available resource in our country.
That is great, and the fact that reusing existing traditional inspirations is key, I think, because we try to understand our stakeholders, our communities, our teachers, and reusing existing playful methodology or playful instruments will really help us to, in the way, be more frugal in terms of resource development and playfulness or playful learning or playful aspects. It links to how creative we are. For instance, if when we were growing up, we would use whatever we can find in our surroundings and create a game out of it, perhaps, or playing with something, or playing with sun and creating sandcastle, and we create our own rules type thing, and reusing existing that is around us. And it also links with how imaginative we are in terms of thinking of scenarios and environments that can help students to learn in a more creative way. I must say. So yes, I quite like the idea from your team and how you have actually explored the use of traditional inspirations and things like that. And I presume similar things are being implemented in Malaysia. Perhaps Fitri or Aazani would be able to elaborate more about how would this principle be, implemented in the real world. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, of some of the talking points that we have today, this one is really one of the closest to my heart. As a parent as well, and like Alex had mentioned earlier, we are helping our students to be more resilient, and that's really, and our own children to be more resilient, and that's really very important because we are sending them off into a world that is very different. Technology is growing 2 times faster than in our generation. Jobs that exist in the future do not yet exist now. Knowledge is available on the internet freely. You can Google any word and you get, thousands and millions of hits of videos. And so like Deka mentioned as well, the children get overwhelmed with a lot of information, and sometimes it's very hard for them to put into context what it is. And so, what's important and what is real and what is not real. I heard that the last conference of flat earthers had, 1 million followers. And, so in a way, it's about these skills and resourcefulness that the children need has to partly be guided by the parents as well. And we are teaching them in a way that we were never taught. So parents as well play this role in supporting the teachers in helping the kids have access to the right type of resources that are available on the internet. Technology connections, like Deka mentioned about TikTok, is all available, and it's all very low cost, and it's, I would say, widely available even in places where internet is very weak. So in Malaysia, that's very fundamental in some of the ACES work, where we actually have been reaching out during the pandemic to schools that are semi-rural or rural, but because the internet is good enough for that, we've been able to do some activities. The STEM bucket is one of them, where they have a collection of activities that they can work through the different levels of difficulties. But I would like to just show, because I have an example here with me where's the camera? Of a band. It is made out of plastic. Basically, it's the cover of the coffee powder. So there's a lot of waste that's available, and waste management is one of the largest issues in our country. I think it's the same as in Indonesia, right, Deka? Waste management is one of the largest issues. And so then we work with these resources that are available with the children, and actually they already have these skills on how to make this, because they make these folded ketupat, which they stuff with rice. They already know how to make a lot of this. They already have the skills, but they did not upscale it into other things. So the moment we started showing them things like this, they were able to make it themselves, or with very little guidance move on to make bags and a lot of other materials as well. And I think it's similar to something that's got a global movement, for example, the eco bricks, which we are also going to start, where it's relatively easy, and we're just using what's available to us. And like Deka said, the kids actually find a lot of fun in just cutting things. But at the same time, for us, it's just, it's simple. You're just cutting plastic. But to children, it's learning how to use material, it's learning different types of scissors, it's learning the skill for cutting. And so different types of ages of children can also participate. And I like to add, because this hasn't been mentioned, about diversity, where in Malaysia, the gap in education is actually, I would say, quite wide between the rural and city children. And there are a lot of things that we take for granted, that, okay, if they're 5 years old, they should be able to do that. They should be able to write their name. They should be able to know how to use scissors. But it's not always the case. And so I think having diverse activities that are practical things, things to learn. For example, for this, in the city school or in a village, we have to guide and coach different skills. And so as an educator, we also have to build our own resilience while we are teaching the resilience for the children. I think this is quite important. If Sylvester was abandoned on an island, I think you could make your own hut, right? Or at least your own clothes.
Exactly.
Make your own clothes. So I think, or use make bags for your vacuum cleaner. I think, and just a lot of this as well is to hopefully plug the gap on the differences between the rural and city children. The skill levels are different for different communities. And I think like what Alex has highlighted here, resourceful, practical, and trying to build the resilience. All the children come in at different levels, and we really have to try and localize that for our children here, at least for the ACES project in Malaysia. Maybe Fitri, you want to add on some other things that we've been
Fantastic.
looking at?
Yeah.
It's
I
so
just
good.
a little bit on what you were saying was I think it leads towards something that we also take for granted, pre-COVID. For instance, when I watch my kids now, they can't go to any playground. All the playgrounds are closed, and they can't meet their friends. Social interaction completely changed. Now they only have each other. I have two kids. They're only talking to each other. These are their housemates, their classmates, their dinner mates, everything. Somehow the social circle becomes really, really small. So what do you do, to teach resilience? Because the resilience that they can only see visually in front of them are the things that they see in the four walls of the house, nothing else, But I think children being children, and I love the way that they tend to explore things on their own. Like for instance, my son misses camping. So I tell him, like, just set up a camp. My house isn't very big, but I just told him to set up camp in the living room, and then he's quite happy with it. He slept in it for the whole weekend. And then yesterday, my daughter was saying that she misses drawing with her friends. So she actually opened a whiteboard in Roblox and started drawing this white canvas with her friends, and they were commenting on each other, and they were nudging each other to draw things. And I thought it was quite interesting that they can actually build their own playground, on their own initiative. And I didn't even start it, and it was all on them. So I think this is something that did not exist in the psyche of a lot of teachers, I think, and parents, because when we grew up, we didn't have to resort to things like this. I remember when I was small, if I want to play, I'll just go out and run next door, and that's it. I have friends. Now they can't do that. So this is where I think what Alex was talking about, the resilience. How do you get them to think so that they become adaptable towards their environment at this point in time? So yeah, I'll let perhaps Dom to pick this up from a teacher's point of view. Dom.
Yeah, I personally love the idea of practical things, like practical solutions to problems that are relevant. So the idea that the concept of trailing edge technology as well. I'm sure from a sort of teacher's perspective, I've worked in so many places where there are instruments and tools and things that have been bought and then not used. I mean, virtual whiteboards spring to mind, and visualize lots of stuff. And it's like, I give it over to the kids, give them a problem, and tell them to use the tech to solve it. I think it's a wonderful idea. I think there's so much pressure in teaching, especially when you start out, to have everything planned, to have, you must know what your goals are and your aims and your focus, and minute by minute lesson planning in some places, depending on the qualifications that you get. And so the idea of sort of giving over control to students it's difficult for some people, but I've always had the best results doing that. I guess have confidence in the people in the room. Your students are capable of all sorts of things, and they will enjoy themselves as long as you're there sort of guiding them and nudging them in the right sort of direction. The idea that you're surprised by, you should always be surprised by your students in a good way, and you should be creating the opportunity for that to happen. And that then leads to resilience, both in the teachers and the learners, and you have this sort of positive cycle. So yes, I agree with everything that's been said.
I love that. I love this discussion in terms of, us trying to understand that there are barriers in terms of the prescribed curriculum and the way of how teaching has been practiced so many years, right? And then how important it is for us to realize that giving control or giving autonomy to the learners are important as well. So in terms of playful learning, we often talk about the magic circle. So the magic circle is like how restrictive or how free an activity is, and how you can frame the teaching in terms of giving autonomy to learners to see how they can solve a problem without us giving them any guidelines on how they can solve it. That will allow them to be more creative in terms of working with each other, trying to find solutions. And of course, as you said, Dom, we also need to facilitate it. So that is where the magic circle is, meaning that within the magic circle, certain things need to be achieved. How they will achieve it is up to them, giving them freedom to explore different resources they can use to solve that particular problem. I think that is quite interesting. Is what Fitri was saying, that right, okay, wanted to go camping, but you can't do it, right? Okay, there are restrictions there, but the magic circle is let's do it within an indoor home environment. You can do whatever you want, create whatever you want, and experience it, and then reflect on it and improve it. So that would help learners to feel like they are in a safe space. They're allowed to make mistakes. They're allowed to take risk. However, Fitri being there to be able to make sure that he's safe, type thing. So yeah, so those are the things that we can actually explore in play, and we need to encourage educators to be more free and to give them the skills or the instruments that will allow them to practice it, I think. Right, so this link to the final principle, last but not least, and Alex, would you like to set the scene?
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep. So I think kind of quickly add a little bit there about constraint really does breed creativity. And I think when Fitri said earlier, how do we make our teachers understand how to be creative, and how do we teach creativity? And I think constraint is a really big part of that. And through, like you said, with your children, finding ways of doing things with what they have. I think one of the powerful parts of this is those trailing edge technologies, using those and leveraging them. You have a limit to what you can do. You don't necessarily have a completely blank canvas, and that's where creativity really flourishes, I think. So that's great. We've talked those things through, but how do we actually do this now? So build at the speed of need. This principle really talks about that. We're talking, as I mentioned at the very beginning, about embracing a circular pedagogy model. So what I have suggested before is to start small. If you start small, you can build quickly, keep things lean, and do this iteratively in a cycle of prototyping and refinement. So really talking about design, teaching and learning with sustainability in mind. So we want to be environmentally responsible, both locally and globally. But it's a lot to ask. So when we're designing new things, we don't have to design it. This huge thing is, we always used to talk about this in the lab, is we'd bring a new project and we want to do something really exciting, and we'd start with, let's make a 1 hour activity, and by the end everyone's, we're talking about building a rocket ship to the moon, because everyone's got great ideas and they keep building on each other's ideas until we get to this completely impractical idea at the end, and nobody can actually build it. So we have to start small and we build on that. So I've talked about this before as a minimum viable pedagogy. So do the absolute bare minimum you need to deliver, test it out, see how the students respond to that, then go away and refine that idea and build on it, get their input, get their feedback, and then slowly create a more complex design. So you're testing it as you go. The importance here is to be minimal. So be economical with the resources that you have. Look to reduce administrative processes, minimize the cost, and simplify your design. It'll be easier to build and deliver, and therefore easier to manage. So free up those valuable resources so that you can use them better to serve the learners. So secondly, we talk about sustainability. So whether you're designing something from scratch or adapting an existing practice, consider the wider impact of your design on the environment. So think about the first order effects of your design decision, so how they might impact the local environment. But then once you've done that, zoom out and consider the second order effects of your design and how that might impact our planet, you know, on a global perspective. And that doesn't necessarily mean about climate change. It could be about you have a great design and it works in your local community, but how might you adapt that to work for people in different countries, in different communities? So how might you make it more flexible so that you can maybe switch out certain materials that might be available for you, but not available for others? So you give them the freedom to say, how might you adapt this for your own learning environments, for example? And thirdly, as I've said many times over, about being iterative. So don't overthink it. Start small and iterate often. Test the effectiveness of your design through rapid prototyping and really embracing the flexibility to respond to the effect. To respond quickly and effectively to the needs of the audience, really. The audience being your students. So design, resource, and build and deliver quality education through this continuous recycle of.
I think we've lost Alex slightly there.
I'd love to hear how you've embraced these iterative design in your own projects.
Yeah, that's good. I think Alex, we lost you just slightly there, but I think what you were asking is like, well, how is this being practiced in your activities and practices and whatnot, and perhaps just to build on the stuff that Aazani talked about in terms of the eco brick and so on and so forth. It's like what are your experiences in working with the stakeholders there? Because movement restriction and whatnot. So how did you engage with them in terms of looking at it from the speed of need, their particular needs and whatnot?
Sorry. We found that with going on the ground, mobilizing for the STEM bucket as well as some of the activities, for example, the eco bricks, that we were able to do it online with some parents' guidance as well, or an adult or older child, and that was actually quite possible. I think we have to give credit to the children that after 1 year being online, that they actually were quite versed in using the technology, and so they are adapting to technology a lot faster than the older generation, I would say. So the learning that's been centered around the students, I think we've been trying to be matching to what were their needs. So like Deka said, a lot of it was very open to what were requested by the teachers as well in their schools, because due to the 1 year being away, co-curricular activities were halted for the past over 1 year, nearly 2 years, and that was also something the teachers wanted to address, to have continual activities for the students besides the formal education, to give them not just the structured resources, but to allow these informal resources to be available based on what was what they had where they were. Yeah. I can't comment too much about the iterative process because we haven't done it more than one cycle yet, but I think we will pick up some of the notes about recycling, as Alex had mentioned. In terms of the open sourcing, we've already made available some of the activities from the STEM bucket, for example, the water filter projects to Vietnam and I believe to Indonesia partners as well. And we're looking to see how they may be able to use their own sustainable materials available in their own villages and adapt and kit up their own water filters. Maybe JC is not online, but I think Fitri may be able to add a bit about what was done with the school, with Florana's project. With the school kids.
Yeah. As you know, we were not able to run this on our own, so we got our students to do the STEM bucket project with about 100 kids all over Sarawak, all over Malaysia actually. And we videotaped all of the sessions, and we were able to see that the STEM bucket, the water filter particularly, triggered their thinking about the quality of water, what are the things around the house that they can use. It's not something that they really must buy. It's actually things which is in front of them that they can use and experiment with, and it's a lot of trial and error. And the kids, almost all of them, told us that they wanted more. So this tells us that there is this cognitive hunger, if you will, of people wanting to do more with less. So I think Alex picked the right word here, minimal. What do you call it? Just do with what you have, and use it and think of it in creative ways, collaboratively perhaps, and then with the iteration, with the continuous thinking about the process. This is where we can become more innovative as time goes by. So yeah, yay, Alex.
So that's great. And for the viewers who are not familiar with the STEM bucket program that we are running in the different countries, STEM bucket refers to the collection of different types of activities which are playful and creative, and also frugal. They are addressing the needs of STEM subjects, so the interconnection of engineering, math, and so on and so forth, and also including sustainability and all sorts of different challenges we wish to address, and encouraging learners to be in a way creative in their learning, and to be able to value the process of learning and value the topic that they are addressing as well. So this is STEM bucket. So those of you who are interested to find out more about this particular program, just let us know. And you will be able to find contact information on the website of aces.gchanges.org. And Deka, perhaps you might want to add a bit more on this, because you guys are also running STEM bucket in Indonesia, and what are your perspectives in terms of the process that you have gone through?
Okay, talking about the process of the creating ideas of STEM bucket, actually we're considering about how to use the minimal cost to create big impact, because we know that our ideas will implement and disseminate for many teachers in Indonesia. So talking about the STEM bucket, actually we choose as frugal and economical as possible. And we have 10 ideas about STEM bucket. We have 10 ideas about traditional games, and all of them are chosen by the minimal indicator. And actually we have one about ideas that represent about the sustainable. For example, we create some SDGs leaderboards, snake and leather boards, but we use billboard plastic. Right. So we are not buying a new plastic, but we use the used plastic in huge billboard, and we provide some ballpoint or marker, and we give them the flashcard contain the question talking about the SDGs. In here, we are trying to make sure that even we do some SDGs number 4, for example, quality of education, we also try to teach students how to keep our land is clean. It will be SDGs number 15 about the land wash. So about all of the item of STEM bucket and traditional, we try to measure the effectivity before we disseminate to the teachers. We do some qualitative approach, and based on the volunteer and student reflective, we make some decision, then we are ready to disseminate. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one thing that is clear in terms of what our colleagues in Indonesia and Malaysia are doing in terms of the repurposability of different types of activities. So that would link with what Alex was talking about in terms of recycling existing methods that you have used, existing resources. It can be used in so many different ways. And this is the beauty of it, I think, in terms of building at the speed of need, because the configuration and the reconfiguration of the learning resources and the learning practice will change and evolve according to the needs and according to the specific topics that you want to address and the specific capabilities and skills that you would wish to develop. So I think this is something that is so wonderful in terms of when us trying to be more creative in terms of identifying the different aspects that should be included as part of a learning process. Dom, is like perhaps because we are about to run out of time, so perhaps if you would like to, in the way, provide some perhaps some examples that you have seen before in terms of reconfiguration of learning resource or learning design that you have seen that you think will be useful in terms of the capabilities of teachers.
I can't think of a good example right now. I just, I'd stress a couple of things that I think have come out of this. Like, first of all, play is a capability. So, creating the opportunities for young people and adults to have that in their life is, number one, a great thing. Beyond that, there's all sorts of other aspects of the capability related to education. I mean, this idea of sort of rapid iteration of problem solving lends itself to reflection, which in itself is a very, very useful skill. Also linking to motivation, this idea that, if you're trying something and it isn't working, you're reflecting, you're learning, and you're also developing that skill, which is linked to resilience, your ability to adapt to different situations. Also, you're revealing within yourself the need for something else. So if you fail to do something, instead of that being a high consequence, what you're actually seeing is, well, actually, in order for me to do this better next time, I need to learn X, which then you're motivated to learn that. So it's not you being told you need to learn something, it's you realizing that there is something missing that you need to learn, which means you'll be more motivated to learn it, which means you'll be more successful in learning it. And that in itself is lifelong learning. I mean, this is how it all fits together.
Excellent. So that's sort of really summarized really in terms of how we are looking at frugal practices, also from the aspect of play, because playfulness is all about experimenting, it's all about the sense of autonomy, the sense of freedom, so on and so forth, as well as in terms of how resilience can be developed in terms of practices, the resilience of teachers, the resilience of young people and the community in general, and also linking to 21st century skills. We can definitely spend the whole day talking about this, but unfortunately, I think we are running out of time. And so I think we should do another series of this, I think, because there's so many things that we can talk about, so many different types of examples that we can actually show that will hopefully help educators to, in a way, vision or visualize the approach in a more practical way. So this is perhaps some things that educators out there, if you would like to work with us, we are happy to have conversations with you and see how we can explore the principles of frugal education in your practice, or in the practice of your institution, or in the practice of your communities, that we can learn from each other. And there might be some different types of case studies that we can actually work on. And if you are in Malaysia, you can definitely contact Aazani and Fitri. And if you are in Indonesia, please contact Deka. And if you are in the UK, please do contact myself, Dom, or Alex. And if you are from countries which are not in the three countries I mentioned, please do give us a shout, because we are also working with educators around the world in collecting examples or practice exemplars of how frugal education, playful education, creative education has been implemented in your community. And if you visit our website, which is aces.gchanges.org, you will also see a link for Remix Play 4, where it contains a collection of 10-minute videos showcasing practice exemplars that you might want to take inspiration from. And we are happy to have a chat, and hopefully we can work with you. Before we end, are there anything else from the panel to say to our viewers?
Just a big thank you for your time, really. I'm glad that it all makes sense to everybody, and hearing your examples is always enjoyable to hear, and it's always inspiring. And I think it's good times to come. I think some great ideas coming.
I agree. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's an idea to keep the conversations going. This is our form of iteration, I guess, in some sense.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, to make our ideas sharper and better and perhaps more relevant to different groups of people.
Excellent. So with that, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much to the panel members today for your time to discuss this particular topic. It is definitely a topic that we are exploring, and yeah, thank you very much. And for those who are viewing this, either in the session that are gonna come up soon, yeah, enjoy the session and enjoy the discussion, and hope that we will have a discussion with you in person soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.